Before we get to your scheduled video, please remember that likes and comments tell YouTube to promote our work to other people, and subscribing to the channel tells you when something new drops. You can also head to the link tree in the description to peruse my books, join us on Discord, or support us on Patreon. You can get episodes of Journey of Wrestling and Violent Profiles early, as well as a load of other treats. Even just $1 a month earns you a name drop for being cool. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show. Greetings and salutations, fellow charismatic thieves. It is I, Eric J. Chucky, joined as always by the boy.
Hey.
This is the Two Nerds Podcast, and today, well, let's talk about who's cool. That's going to be a guy from Ohio, Harmony, Passion Killer 711, Distrucity KTL on the tip of your tongue, and Rob. See, Rob has been a patron at the $15 tier for some time now, and has finally exercised his right to make us watch a thing that is 6 hours or less.
Did we finally come up with a time on that?
It's been the case for the whole time, but I haven't actually put new tiers in the Patreon yet. Whatever. Excuse me. So Rob has chosen Ocean's 11, which worked out well for you because you like this film and have already seen it.
Ocean's 11 is actually very formative for me. It is probably the first heist movie I ever remember really loving. May have been the first heist movie I ever watched. Came out when I was like 12, and I've seen it a lot.
This would be my first time. If you, out there in TV land, want to make us watch something, well, that $15 tier still has plenty of space in it. And eventually I'll come up with higher tiers, where you are unlikely to have to watch something, but I, well, this is how I get paid. So, yeah, I've never been interested in this film at all.
Notably, I've been trying to get him to watch it for years, and he has rebuffed me many times.
Yeah, well, you express your gratitude to Rob and his $15.
Thanks, Rob.
Ironically, actually, and I think I mentioned this a few months ago, before this came up, I was planning on taking some time to sit down and watch this film with you this year, in fact, because I've been trying to watch a bunch of films from the past, and I've been doing this thing in the last few years where I've been trying to re-experience things that I discredited for whatever reason. And this was important to my friend, so I was going to do it. But as it happens, instead of a nice gesture of friendship, I was held at gunpoint. It was a cheap gun. It was the kind you can get out of the plastic 3D printer machine in Cyberpunk, but still. Yeah. Man.
How about I take the lead here for a bit?
Okay, the compliment sandwich, go for it.
While you give your brain time to formulate all the mean things you want to say about this movie I like. So, Ocean's 11 is a 23-year-old movie at this point. If you haven't seen it yet, go see it. But like, I'm not concerned about a spoiler-free section.
No, I don't think that's necessary.
It is one of the most iconic. Quality is a subjective measurement, but most iconic, I think, can be pretty objectively measured. Heist movies of all time. It's a remake of a much older movie of the same name with the same basic premise. I've never seen the original one because I don't find Rat Pack movies very entertaining. Most of those guys can't fucking act. But this movie has a lot of really good actors in it, including some actors who I was introduced to in this movie. But mostly, this movie, I want to try and give an objective assessment, or as close as I can, about this movie during this review. But I'm going to, right up front, I'm just going to say that I'm probably not the most unbiased reviewer. This movie's very formative for me. I loved it when I was a child. I love it still. A lot. Basically, every scene is something I already, remember. It's a movie I've seen enough times that if I still possessed the kind of facility with remembering like exact quotes of things I possessed in my 20s, I could probably quote the movie. Even still, I've got most of it pretty well locked down. I love this film. I probably always will, but even I am willing to admit that it is a 23-year-old movie, and it isn't perfect.
Well, it's much like a couple years ago when I replayed Final Fantasy VI, and had to take a realistic assessment of the material. It's firmament for me. It is what has built the foundation of what I enjoy in things. I'm never going to not love the game. However, I can see the flaws in it and accept them and understand why somebody else might not care for it.
And that's what I'm going for today, because if it was just me, it would be 3 more minutes long, and it would basically be me talking about how great the movie is and quoting it at you, and that's not good content.
Well, don't worry. I'm here.
Tell us, White, how did you feel about the movie?
I thought it was fine.
Good job. All right, so on to our next section.
As a broad overview, I'm not really into heist movies. I have not owned a man card in several years, so you will be disappointed in that you cannot claim it from me. It just doesn't get me excited. There's a thing the guys have to make a big plan to get. That does not immediately and innately cause me thrills. So we step to the next buy-in for this film, which is the actors, which, as I discovered, only Brad Pitt in the principal, like the main 3 cast, is a guy I've seen in more than 5 films. And George Clooney, those 5 films, while they do include some of his very big, good films, they also include Batman and Robin.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You've said the main 3. We discussed this movie after watching it, and just now. Mm-hmm. Who do you mean?
Brad Pitt, George Clooney, and Matt Damon.
Okay, good. That's correct. Yeah. You could also mean Brad Pitt, George Clooney, and Julia Roberts, but I feel like she's very much more of a side character.
She's a secondary character.
Yeah.
And Matt Damon, I've not seen in anything where he wasn't playing Loki.
Weird coincidence that.
Yeah. So I've basically never seen a Matt Damon film. So, I'm not, I have nothing wrong with George Clooney. The things I have seen him in, I've enjoyed his performance, but I don't have that buy-in. Also, I'm no longer in my late teens, early 20s, so the presence of Brad Pitt in a film doesn't, create that buy-in. I might as well not know who Matt Damon is. I mean, So, that secondary pull of, oh yeah, these guys, these actors I really like are in this film. Awesome.
Which is a intended pull of the movie.
Yes.
That is one of the things that was designed when they remade this film, because when they made the original movie, it was designed basically, its pull was, look, the Rat Pack made a movie, all of them, you can watch them do stuff.
Right. These characters don't get a lot of build, a lot of establishment. They get some, and I'm not even going to be critical of it. But obviously they're banking on the innate charisma of the actors, the innate star power of the actors.
You don't end up knowing a whole lot about most of the characters in this movie.
And I would honestly say you end up knowing more about the rest of the 11 and Julia Roberts and the bad guy than you do the principal 3.
I would say, of the principal 3, you end up knowing a fair amount about Linus, was his name? My brain has already forgotten. I love this movie. I've watched this movie dozens of times, but I haven't seen it in 15 years.
Linus.
But you end up knowing a fair bit about him. Rusty, nothing. You know basically nothing about Rusty as a person.
And the amount you know about Danny Ocean is the amount you are required to know to understand his motives.
Yes, and not a whit more. Now, I think that's an intentional choice.
Sure.
These are supposed to be, a very shady crime guys, and the less you know of them, the more that mystique is available.
Yeah. So that was the second barrier that made it difficult for me to want to watch this film. The third barrier is an ages-long hatred of Julia Roberts. I have, in fact, seen more Julia Roberts films than George Clooney films, and I didn't like any of them except Hook. I guess the one about the conspiracy theories was okay, but, that may have been called conspiracy theory. I have a big grudge with her. Again, this is something I need to get over. It was dumb shit I decided when I was a teenager that I have held on to for 20 years hence. And
maybe rethink it is the right move.
I still don't care for her as an actress. But it's not, I can watch a movie with her in it and not boil with unnecessary rage. I am an adult now. Now that's a silly barrier for entry, but it was one for me personally. The fourth one, and this is more a barrier of me not being really excited about this film, is it is 2024. This movie came out in 2001. I have seen media since then. It was a very influential film. Seinfeld is unfunny.
For those not familiar, Seinfeld's Unfunny is the idea that Seinfeld, when it came out, was a very funny show, but it was so influential that many comedies that came out after it took very strong inspiration from it, and because they had the freedom to iterate on and improve on Seinfeld's jokes, when you go back to the original, they fall flat, because you're getting the raw materials that have since been refined. To Ocean's 11, that is somewhat true. This movie was highly influential for a very specific style of movie, and even related ones. And because of that, later media does variations on Ocean's 11 things that have been refined. And thus, when you see the original, although it was very, good and influential at the time, it ends up falling flat. Not for me, because I have nostalgia to buoy me up. Right. But I could see why someone who is fresh to the material, it wouldn't hold up. Like, as an example, there's one thing you pointed out right in the middle of the movie. We paused for a second. There's a very stylistic scene, fairly early in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Where they go through and they do recruiting for all of the various members of Ocean's 11.
We'll call this the fifth barrier of my enjoyment.
And in that in one of the scenes, they're recruiting Matt Damon's character, Linus, and he's a pickpocket. Before he shows up, before he joins the crew, he's a pickpocket. And it's set in Chicago, and it's a very blue scene as opposed to the rest of the movie, which is very orange and red and warm colors. And it's supposed to be a stylistic departure from the rest of the movie, so that when you come back to warmer climes, it feels the transition is felt. One of the ways they did this was when they were showing the subway car, or
might have been a bus.
It's an above ground train that exists in Chicago.
Oh, it's Chicago. It was an L train, yeah.
Yeah, but they don't call it a subway. When they're showing him on, I'm guessing probably specifically the L. He pickpockets a guy, but they show both the train moving and then the indoor shot of the train, and then him doing the lift, all in a very stylized shutter effect slow motion. So it looks like a series of still images more than slow motion traditionally. It was big in the early 2000s. Very popular, this particular style of cinematography. You would see this in movies. You don't see it anymore.
Well, no, we've invented better techniques since then. And the 2000s aesthetic, the early 2000s aesthetic, is dripping off of this film. The haircuts, man, these haircuts are so bad. Almost everyone has the worst haircut I've ever seen.
White famously hates the Caesar haircut.
Yeah.
And George Clooney has one, and
so does Elliot Gould.
So does Elliot Gould. and his eyes, it is drawn to the tiny fringe at the top of the forehead, and it fills him with hatred.
Well, and Brad Pitt's frosted tips, and it's just so...
I maintain that Brad Pitt's frosted tips were fire. They were of the era, but they weren't ugly.
There's nothing wrong with it. I think this just might be the first time that I haven't been intentionally injecting myself with, like, commercials of the era or some other kind of intentional nostalgia where I have been punched in the face by the flavor of 2001.
Yeah, this movie is, when I say it is, if you were around when this movie came out and you never saw this movie and no one told you, you didn't know about this movie, you'd never heard of it, and someone just began playing this movie, I think you have an even odd shot of nailing the year it came out.
I did, in fact. So, all of that combined, I think what I have to say for the movie is high praise. I don't find much fault with it. I think the plot was solid. I think the characterization we got for the characters who weren't supposed to be carried by their actors was pretty good. Good enough to get through the movie anyhow. I think the twists and turns were fun and interesting. And I say this with no malice. I think Julia Roberts lifts out of the movie pretty handily. Even if you replaced her with a different actress, it's...
Well, yes, Julia Roberts could have been any popular actress at the time.
Well, and I don't think the character needs to be there necessarily. I get it, studio stuff. I get it. But,
at this time, in this era of filmmaking, you were never going to get away from having a romantic subplot for the male lead.
Sure.
That's just not the way this kind of movie gets made.
Correct. And that's fine. It got your movie to almost 2 hours, so...
And lots of people notably... Now, to be fair, I've never given a shit about Tess. That's Julia Roberts' character. I don't give a shit about her in the movie. I've never given a shit about her and Danny Ocean getting back together, having seen this movie many times.
May I go on a tangent?
1 second.
Okay.
But I've always liked watching that part of the movie because I feel it feels good for Danny, for this essentially what I viewed as his little side quest, to be going well. But I agree that she does kind of lift right out.
Well, and I don't necessarily support Danny. He's I'm not here to I'm not behind him. I mean, I want to see the movie happen, but I'm not rooting for the guy.
You're not on his side.
Yeah. So I don't really care about him achieving victory in his side quest. My tangent. Tess sounds like a fake name, and I know it's not. I know what it's short for. I have no problem with Tessa. Tess sounds like a fake name. Sounds made up.
You're right, that is a complete tangent.
Yeah, it's just a weird, and it's difficult. It was a little difficult for me. Every time someone was like, "Hey, Tess." Yeah, okay, all right. You're gonna name the next character Squishy? Is that what's going on here? Is the character named Squishy? There actually might be a character named Squishy. Hold on. Nope. Rusty. Actually, I'm seeing here, his real name is Robert. Did Brad Pitt pay for me to watch this movie?
Entirely possible.
This is where, if I edited this show in a scenario where I don't just make stupid mistakes, I would include the X-Files theme song. But anyway, as I bring up that I wasn't very much behind George Clooney, I should also, it seems like a fine time to mention, they waited a long time for me to hate the bad guy.
I like that. You are correct that they did, but I like that.
I think it's bold and I support it, but it was a choice.
Definitely. Benedict is a tool, but he's not a guy who ties maidens to railroad tracks.
No.
He's just a mafia guy.
Right.
He's just a ruthless Vegas casino guy.
Right.
he's not a good person. You're not supposed to empathize with him. And they do a good job of introducing him as... foreshadowing him as a threatening character. Introducing him as an efficient one, and developing him as an asshole.
I think when you're making a movie where your principal cast are thieves, you would want to. My inclination would be to introduce the character with a bit less favor. The villain, that is to say. Because you're already kind of working a little bit uphill from, like, a moral standpoint. They're on equal ground. They're all assholes. Why is this guy the worse asshole?
Because he's not charming.
He's not George Clooney.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they do a good job of developing him to a point where you are happy to see him get robbed, fuck him. But at the start of it, it's because he's not charming. It's because he's not George Clooney and Brad Pitt having fun dialogue with each other, where they name goofy cons and go through like a montage of a bunch of wacky guys they're going to be hanging out with. Bernie Mac isn't on his side, okay?
That we know of.
I mean, no, we're pretty clear he's not, like...
Yet.
What a twist for the sequel. Bernie Mac was a double agent the whole time.
I kind of thought for a little while that they were doing that with Matt Damon, especially when he just decided to ruin part of the mission because he was annoyed.
Which is exactly what he did. Like, that character does fuck up in that scene.
Yeah, I would look down at my phone when they have locked Matt Damon in the truck with the annoying brothers. And I looked back up and he was making a mess of things for no reason, and I thought I missed something. Because, I don't know, I guess if you're on a big professional heist that's this complex and there's that much to lose, you don't just go...
Fuck it, we'll do it live?
Yeah, especially for no reason.
Yeah, no, there are character reasons and there are underlying reasons, but there's no, like, twist. It's just, he fucked up.
Yeah.
He just is a rookie and he fucked up.
And that's okay. I don't have a problem with it. It doesn't endear me to him, but whatever. I don't count in the first place.
You know, thematically supposed to make his... like that he does well later. It's like a little redemptive thing. Like he manages to pull it together and get his shit done.
Okay, I can see that, and I can see it does things. It's not like the plot of this movie is not bad. It's good. They did a good job. It's tight. They foreshadow things. They set up stuff that pays off later. Small details that explode into big important stuff like you'd like. Mm-hmm. They do the thing. No complaints. This was a fine film. I just wasn't bought in.
No, that's absolutely fair. There's also an argument to be made that he fucks up. So in universe, Danny and Rusty come up with a plan to troll him. As, like, punishment and comeuppance for him acting like a moron. And, outside the narrative, he fucks up so that later, when Danny and Rusty just troll him for no reason...
True.
They don't come across like unprofessional assholes. It comes across as fun razzing between the guys.
Sure, I suppose. I didn't find much wrong with that, so perhaps the magic trick worked. What more do you have to say about this film as we approach the end of the podcast slowly?
So very slowly. So anyway, I think this movie is, how to put this? It's a really fun film, and I think personally, I'm always gonna love it. Separate from that. From my own personal feelings aside, I think it's a very well-made movie. All the cinematography is very excellent to the point of being influential on many later movies.
I will say this again. While there's some early stuff, like the 2001 stuff that I don't really agree with use of, but I'm older than then, so, I know stuff they didn't back then. There was only one shot in this film that I was like, why did we do that? And they actually paid it off later. So, masterful. I agree with you.
What shot was that?
They zoom in on the air freshener of one of the trucks during a scene. And previously they'd done that, and they zoomed in on the balloons, and that transitioned into the balloon distraction when the guy lets go of the balloons and covers up the camera with him in the casino. That was good. When they zoomed in on the air freshener, they just did that and then ended the scene. And I was thinking at the time, that was stupid. Why would you choose to do that? And they answered that question roughly half an hour later.
There you go. All right.
By zooming in on the air freshener. Did I say conditioner? I meant freshener. In the fake SWAT vehicle. As to let you know, the audience, which is a thing... I'm interrupting you too much. Please continue. I was just saying the cinematography, you are correct, is good, and I agree with that.
I'm interested to hear what the thing is.
Well, the other thing I have to complain about, and this is definitely studio mandate, I feel like after the plot goes off, the villain over-explains the plot a bit. And especially when the movie is doing small things like the air freshener to showcase what has occurred, treating its audience as though they are able to put two and two together, it does the film overall a disservice. Now, that's a super tiny nitpick because he says it for like 5 seconds and then we move on with our lives. And if somebody did need that to go, oh, well, that's quite clever, that's good. But I'm not that person, so I get annoyed by it.
Yeah, you're right. That's an incredibly tiny nitpick.
Yep. And that should show you that I thought this film was fine. Is good.
I think this movie's very, masterfully done. I think the cast was the exact right cast, both of the moment and after the fact. I think Yeah.
I've clicked on the director, Steven Soderbergh, so...
Well, I mean, it's so much so that when people talk about, we're going to put this in, a Steven Soderbergh-style little box, and then we're going to look over in the corner, and there's going to be another thing going on. Mm-hmm. They're speaking about Ocean's 11. That's what they're talking about. His other films as well, but that is what they're talking about.
Sure.
But I think... I want to end on a note about that I found out. Side note, Don Cheadle, when I was a kid, I didn't notice how bad his English accent was. It's not good.
When I was looking into stuff, and actually before you get to your ending note, because I'm sure it's better than whatever crap one-liner I'd come up with, I do want to say I really liked Elliot Gould. I really liked Carl Reiner. They were my favorite characters, probably. Don Cheadle being able to disappear into a role where he's doing a garbage accent and looks like Don Cheadle.
And it's still vanished. He's Basher.
It's amazing.
He doesn't feel like Don Cheadle at all.
Astounding. But when I was looking at stuff about this movie to, get images and whatnot, like I need to do, editing stuff, I found out that recently, and over the years, it has become a theory that Basher was putting on a fake English accent. And Don Cheadle's like, you will give me that excuse? I will take it.
Even Don Cheadle knows what he was doing.
And there was one other person I kind of wanted to talk good about. Oh yeah, Bernie Mac. I thought Bernie Mac was great in this.
Bernie Mac is great in basically everything he's ever been in, or will ever be in, I guess. But the last thing I wanted to note was after this movie, I went and checked the cast of the 11 principal, Ocean's 11 and Daniel Ocean.
There are actually 11 of them. I miscounted when we were watching the film. Elliot Gould gets his standing, and I'm proud.
Nice. I went back and checked all of them, and Julia Roberts, and, I realized that the last movie I saw basically all of these guys in, except for, I believe, Matt Damon and Don Cheadle, and to a lesser extent, Brad Pitt. But even then, I think basically everything I've seen Brad Pitt in, except one movie, was before this. Most of these guys, the last thing I ever saw them in was Ocean's 13. And I just haven't seen any of them since. I haven't seen a single George Clooney thing since Ocean's 13.
There's been movies I've wanted to watch of his that have come out since.
The only things I've seen Matt Damon in since Ocean's 13 is a bit part as Loki in the MCU. In the play. And I think of them, Don Cheadle and Brad Pitt are the ones I've seen in the most shit post then, and that's just because Don Cheadle's in a lot of MCU stuff.
You're erasing, and I will not stand for this erasure of Space Jam: A New Legacy.
I haven't seen that.
You shouldn't. It's not good. But if you don't care about 90 minutes of your life and want to watch Don Cheadle just absolutely gorge himself on every ounce of digital scenery, you could find a worse way to spend your time.
And much in the same way, you can find a lot worse ways to spend your time than watching Ocean's 11.
If I had been, and this, okay, spoiler-free review time. Are you ready here at the end of the podcast where it goes?
Sure.
If the premise of this movie or the three principal actors are at all interesting to you, watch the film. You will love it.
And notably, we said, we're going to spoil stuff. We haven't really spoiled any of the we spoiled one big twist. But, it was mixed in with a bunch of other shit, so you might not notice. Anyway.
What if I just left it recording for a long time?
What if we transition to a weird musical interlude where we go and look at a fountain for a long time?
I was going to give you the fountain, man.
And we stare knowingly and fondly at each other and nod in mutual respect. And then I pat you on the back and walk away, and then you stand there for a long time by yourself, just sort of taking in the universe. And then
you, Ultimo Dragon, Rob, Destrucity KTL, a guy from Ohio, Harmony, Passion Killer 711, on the tip of your tongue, all just standing there admiring each other as we leave one by one.
Ultimo Dragon is the last.
Yeah, he's the last one, obviously. He's the Carl Reiner.